you're going to do it, the audit should be worth it. The problem is, audits are hard. Yet we've issued over 20,000 reports to 2,000 clients worldwide.
You know, a lot of companies were just collecting data. They weren't really getting what we would call consent from you, and informing you on how they're using that data.
Cybersecurity and compliance will no longer be a mystery.
Hey everyone, welcome into our cybersecurity mission. My name is Allie Krings. I'm your host. Today I am sitting down with Gene Fry. Gene, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
I am excited to sit down with you and learn a little bit more about these privacy regulations. But before we get there, I want to know a little bit more about you. How did you get here with Kirkpatrick Price?
Well, I have been in the healthcare space for several years and helped start a company, and we were very security type focused, and we're real focused on the data and data privacy because it was all healthcare data. So at that time, back in 1996 when we started, it was right when HIPAA was coming about for healthcare.
Okay.
So got involved in the regulations and monitoring the regulations and trying to keep up with the regulations. In the first few years with the business, I was more focused on the system side of stuff and making sure that our service that we were delivering to our customers was secure.
Yeah.
And we were
Yeah.
delivering a very secure service to them. And then eventually, as the company grew and we had more resources and they hired more people, then I moved into a compliance officer type role. And within that role, then I had to really keep up on what was going on, from a regulation standpoint.
And I'm really excited we're diving into this topic today because I think for so many people who listen to the podcast, that's maybe one of the biggest concerns is how do we even stay on top of the regulations and what's going on? So why don't we just start from the very beginning here? What are privacy regulations?
Privacy regulations have been around for many, many years, and we've had privacy in a lot of different regulations here in the United States. That's why we've never really we've not seen a real national type level privacy type regulation, although we're kind of now, working towards that. And in other parts of the world, they've had like a lot of their own, privacy type regulations that were at the national level. So here in the United States, there was a lot of different regulations that companies might have to adhere to, but they were all different, within each of those different areas. So there's a lot of different specific areas that you would have to focus on, that would pertain to your business. So as regulations change, you would have to keep up with everything that's going on because the landscape's changed, a lot over the last several years.
I mean, I think every company can agree, whether it's the last few months, it's changed, the last few years, it's changed, the last few decades, it's changed drastically. So how difficult is it then to stay up to date with all of the different changes?
You'd have to specifically know, everything about your business and all the different areas that you would have to adhere to those regulations. So, if you're a financial company, then there's certain financial regulations. There's multiple versions of them, that's out there depending on what you're trying to address. And you get into healthcare, then you've got HIPAA that you have to deal with. And we were a company that we had financial data, we had HIPAA data.
Okay.
So we had to keep track of multiple regulations, and we were dealing with the federal government space as well. So there's a lot of different. So it's just an individual, has to, from a compliance officer standpoint, you would have to monitor a lot of different areas, go to different conferences. There was just a lot of different ways, that you tried to stay up, and stay informed.
It sounds like a lot of work, but it also sounds like it could be really intimidating, because with all the changes that, I mean, technology goes through or regulations that can be made, it's probably pretty easy to miss something.
Yes, and there's things that even today,
Yeah.
that we'll miss, and it's just there's, like you said, it's just constantly changing, and it's like if you're not staying in the mix every single day, reading and trying to stay up on it, then yeah, you can definitely miss,
Yeah.
things that are going on in the space.
So I think that's really one of the biggest things that we want to talk about in this episode is how do we stay on top of those privacy regulations when it comes to getting this new information that's coming out. Where should we be finding it?
Compliance officers, depending on the area of focus and the regulations that they're looking for, there's a lot of different ways, they can stay up to date. They can get email feeds, they can get regular reading type services, that sends information to, through their email, or they can directly, log into certain sites, be able to keep up on it. LinkedIn is a really good source. There's a lot of companies now that are using, LinkedIn as a way of being able to provide information, and you can follow, those agencies, a lot of law firms and different people, that are working in the space, also creating a lot of the regulations. So, it's just a good way to like centralize it to where, you can get your feeds coming into one particular spot. And it kind of helps with trying to stay up to date. But it still requires, somebody, spending time reading and trying to understand, the regulations and what's changed and what hasn't changed.
Right, so it's kind of twofold. One, you have to get the information. Two, you have to go through the information. And then three, you need to implement changes if there need to be changes.
Exactly.
So can you give us maybe some examples of, where you've seen new regulations come out or, a client or company that needed to make changes and how they were able to move forward with that?
Yeah, so let's just take California for an example, because here in the United States, California was the first state to pass any type of data privacy type regulation, mainly on the consumer side, to protect consumers. There's a lot of area in that was addressed early on through the regulations, where one particular site I cover quite a bit is called Lexology, and it's attorneys that have developed this, and it's worldwide attorneys, so it doesn't just specifically relate to California. It could be, stuff that's going on in the UK or over in Europe and different places. But Lexology, focuses a lot on what's changing in the space, what's going on with the current laws in the landscape, and these attorneys will write articles, related to it, and then they'll publish them, and it's a good source to be able to kind of pinpoint down, and you can follow just different ones. It's not just the state of California. We have 9 states that have implemented their own privacy laws, basically.
So when you talk about Lexology, is this just a website that anybody can get access to, or tell me more about the source?
Yeah, so it's a website that really anybody can have access to, and it feeds the information into your email. So you can filter it, through your email, and basically focus on just what you're looking for like either California or like GDPR or other state type privacy regulations. Once you sign up, there's just a basic service, and you kind of pick and choose, what categories you want to monitor or watch.
Yeah.
And I would say it's probably one of the best resources out there.
Really?
Yeah, for keeping up to date.
What other resources or subscriptions do you recommend taking a closer look at?
For GDPR, there's specific ones out there like GDPR Buzz, Compliance Junction, some of the data protection authorities, because outside the United States, each of the different European unions and the UK and all of them, they have what they call supervisory authorities or data protection authorities. And each of them have their own little, feed and website. And I would say out of all of them, the best is the Information Commissioner's Office. Everybody looks at it as the ICO. And the UK was very was very instrumental on data protection. And they're a really authority that everybody kind of goes to and looks to them for everything that's related to data protection and what we have now for the GDPR.
So I want to kind of go back for a second, because for anybody who's joining us today, I know when we talked about doing this podcast, you could basically choose from any topic. You narrowed it down to privacy regulation. So tell us why this was an area that you felt more aligned to speak to, and why this kind of resonates with you.
Like I said earlier, I was in the healthcare space and started with it in early 1996 when HIPAA came about. So I was, really at that time, I was real interested in, healthcare data and healthcare privacy. So that kind of got me into the privacy end of it. And when the general data protection regulations started coming out, or they were talking about everything coming out in early 2018, it really got me focused on just privacy in general, not just healthcare type privacy, just privacy overall.
Yeah.
And I really saw the need, because this was going on in Europe, so eventually, it's going to come to the United States.
Yeah.
We had all the problems with, hacking going on and breaches and things like that. And people's data that we were collecting, we're as users, we're giving all these companies, that eventually, privacy was going to start to be an issue. And as we see today, now, here in the United States, we've got 9 separate states that, have enacted consumer protection on the privacy side. And we're going to see more, eventually. And I think, from a federal government standpoint, we may eventually see some, federal law, but the states now have pretty much set a precedence, and I think, we're going to see a lot of states that are going to start to address privacy from a consumer standpoint, which is a good thing because, now, you as an individual, the data, that you're giving to these companies, you're going to have some choice in saying, who sees it, how it's being used, how it's being retained, how's it being processed, and you're going to have some control over, these other companies basically on how they're using your data.
So is this like a scenario when you sign up for, let's say even you just download a new app, right? And you have to create a new user login and it says accept terms and conditions. Is this kind of where a lot of consumers might be pigeonholing themselves and not realizing the data that they could be sharing?
Yes. Up until, over the last year or so, a lot of companies were just collecting data. They weren't really getting what we would call consent from you, and informing you on how they're using that data. The sort of people that they're also sending the data to, and they're collecting revenue off from it. And the consumer basically is just giving up their right, to have that data basically given to those companies, and they're profiting from it, and you're really not profiting from it. So what we're seeing now is we're seeing, consumers being able to better understand, because companies are being forced now to let that what they're doing with your data.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a really smart, I think, moment for all of us to kind of maybe double check what we are signing up for or what we are utilizing every single day. So can you give us some examples, I think company-wide, where there have been maybe new privacy regulations, that came out where they were recently implemented or something like that?
Probably the best example is just what's going on in California right now.
Yeah.
A lot of states are kind of following what California's done. There's a little bit of one-off in some of the other states, but for the most part, a lot of people are following California. So the sort of action that's being taken is, when people are submitting data now, their companies have updated their privacy policies. They have to basically tell you, how they're going to process that data, the sort of data that they're actually collecting, and how it's being processed, how long they're retaining that data, and the length of time, that they're going to retain the data.
Right.
And so what you're seeing is a lot of companies now are having to update, a lot of the privacy type policies. They've got to have links, that makes it easy for you as a consumer to be able to read the policy and understand, what's really going on, with your data.
I know we're kind of nearing the end of our episode here, but are there any things about privacy regulations that you feel we haven't covered that you'd love our listeners at home to make sure they have a better grasp of?
Yeah, so from the regulation standpoint, I think the biggest thing is for consumers to understand that, there's probably not going to be a national level type,
I'm going to knock on wood, right?
Yeah.
That's the plan.
It's going to be, from a state level, and you're going to really have to, pay attention to what your state, is enacting and what they're enforcing, from that standpoint. And as we see there's fines, being introduced now. So there's a lot of companies that are going to be forced to make sure that they, start to get more in line with what's going on at the state privacy level. Or they're going to be subject to some pretty hefty penalties that they're going to end up paying at some point.
And your recommendation to that is just to encourage these companies to continue to look up resources and ensure that they are staying up to date.
Yes, and their compliance officers or their information security officers or even the corporate executives at that level, that they understand, what the implications are, if they're not staying up to date, on the regulations.
Awesome. Well, Gene, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me.
Well, thank you.
Will you do it again?
Oh, yes, anytime.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much, and we'll be back again with you guys soon.
When you work with a Kirkpatrick Price cybersecurity auditor, you work with someone who's been in your shoes. Let's see what the next expert is ready to share to support you in your cybersecurity mission.
My name is Verl White. I'm a data privacy professional. I've been working with Kirkpatrick Price for 3 years. And prior to that, I was a director of technology for 5 years. And I was the information security officer for 20 years after that. So I've been in this industry for quite some time. Some people say that I've been in it since Moby Dick was a minnow. I got into information security because I was interested in helping people understand computers. And in working with people back in the days of AOL, I got involved in a senior citizens group, and I was teaching them how to use and be safe and secure when they were using the internet. And so it just kind of progressed from there. And as I was in my career as a director of technology, it seemed natural to start working in the area of trying to protect data and secure it and ensuring that the people's data was protected from misuse from others that weren't authorized to have access to it.
If you want to prepare for success with regulatory compliance, visit kirkpatrickprice.com/podcast or the show notes to download today's episode resources. We're here to empower you to face your cybersecurity and compliance challenges. Are you ready to join a community of 10,000 people who are working together to elevate the standards for cybersecurity and compliance? It's free to sign up at kirkpatrickprice.com/podcast or check the show notes and achieve greater levels of assurance today. Thanks for joining us on our cybersecurity mission.